Hello, welcome back to the channel 12-Step Guide with Troy O. Today we are going to do a thorough review of Step 6 in the Step Book, Alcoholics Anonymous Step Book, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. First, I'd like to look at the natural, how the average person in life, a review, if you will, of the first 5 steps in a different vantage point. The average person in their life has identified a problem. They have reasoned out what might help. Perhaps alcohol became a solution. Certainly, most in life have contemplated God. Bill didn't invent that. We've taken inventory somehow, some version of we've taken inventory. And we've talked this out with others. Up until this point, step 6, what I believe is the great paradox. And I'll get into that a little more. I'll define that. And we'll see if you agree. So, what is step 6? And again, I believe many of us have done a version of step 6, a version, some kind of version. So let's dig into that a little bit on the natural. One more point before we get started. I believe this is very important for the person pursuing recovery. And why is that? If you can see earlier efforts towards trying to quit drinking, trying to quit smoking, trying to stop hurting others in a natural context, maybe you're not brand new. Maybe that earlier work can be pulled forward, evaluated, what went wrong, right? If you honestly, for example, I did in life, sought to stop drinking or drink less or whatever the deal was, and that didn't work out for me, well, this is a new effort. If there's information back there I can evaluate to understand what happened, it's going to help me to correct course. And what's further important, I believe, about that is the more you understand the steps where you really were in the process, and I'm going to get into that. I believe there's some confusion between what step 1 is and what step 6 is. The more you understand where you truly were at and where you're at now, the better you can join those up, evaluate them, strengthen them, repair them towards real success. So what is step 6? We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So how might we see God's work regardless of our belief system? Today, I'm going to try to avoid mystique when contemplating God and instead use undeniable, everyday language to reveal step 6 as best as I can, and the specific building blocks towards success. We can look for this process to show up in our natural instincts for sex, security, society, survival, and life, for example. So what does step 6 mean? Let me ask you a question around natural human function. As a result of a major failure, have you ever been entirely ready to get a divorce or end a relationship? Any of that going around? Quit drinking. Have you ever been entirely ready to change a job, to move, to get out of jail or stop going back in? to change eating habits, to quit smoking, address exercise habits, maybe stop committing crimes, change sexual habits, or address a financial problem as a result of some maybe real problem, things that have happened. And if so, did the word God naturally come out of your mouth, or was it in your mind? For many, I believe it was. It's a common thing. For some, maybe it didn't. I'm trying to get to the natural here. How did you arrive at the attitude or this decision? Not related to step one. How did you naturally get to a point where you needed to, or you became entirely ready to stop drinking, change a job, end a relationship, whatever the case is? What natural format did you utilize to get to that conclusion, which may have led to a formal step one? So now that you're viewing this from a position of strength, previous experience, hopefully that helps you to open your mind and to have an idea of what we're walking into before we even start, based on your historical experience. So we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Let's consider some more foundation before we get into the reading. Bill says, it's the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job. We'll get into that, page 65. He says, we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. So there's some ideas about what that means. What defects of character are we talking about exactly? In this step, we should only be contemplating those things we have identified as a problem. For example, what is your step one? For the alcoholic, the character defect would be the obsession to drink. For others, it might be obsession to take drugs, obsession for excessive sex, obsession to eat in excess or not eat enough, even the obsession to control the alcoholic's behavior. Now, in addition to that, supporting problems we have identified within ourselves that we find objectionable. So we've identified some stuff. These might describe out as drivers, behaviors, outcomes, anomalies we don't like within ourselves or need to be resolved. If we consider more than what we have identified, then instantly fear becomes a factor. Fear of the unknown. Turning my will and life over to the care of God invited plenty of fear of the unknown. My experience in life has been it very much aligned with my abilities, interests. I didn't even necessarily know of some of that. I couldn't have ever told you I'd be doing this right here and now, for example. In these times, there really wasn't much. I was just living life and aware. So I had that fear of the unknown. What's God gonna ask me to do, for example? Now, this fear of the unknown at step 6, this can happen when considering step 6 from a step 1 perspective. For example, we have very limited facts to consider, and so the mind can run wild with fear. The more facts you have, the better you're in a position to contemplate, to understand, to evaluate, to make informed changes as a process to get there. A way to shine light on the darkness, for example. I believe step 6 is further creating, developing, and refining a plan of attack toward recovery and resolution. This would be a formal step 6, specific related to those character defects we have identified. We aren't considering what isn't a problem. Bill also says it's a resting spot. After we've done some significant work, it makes sense that it's going to be a resting spot for us. I believe it's also a paradox. And what do I mean by this paradox? Let me ask you a question to help fetter this out. What came first, the chicken or the egg? What am I really asking here? What came first, step 6 or step 1? Especially when we consider the natural human step 6 reasoning I described, and from my question being, have you ever been entirely ready to do something? What format did you use to arrive at that conclusion that there was a problem? That work that you did is important work to better see where you're at, pull all this together. We'll get into that more. In today's reading, I'll also seek to use an analogy. A cargo ship with cargo containers on it. So let's picture the ship being the primary addiction, and the cargo as the unresolved problems, defects of character, harms, drivers' behaviors leading to shame, humiliation, or failure, and strengths. Because the addiction is the primary thing that houses all of these behaviors that make them work, and we want to retire that ship, if you will. Unload it, open the containers, see what's in them, distribute them. Everything isn't bad. Our whole life hasn't been bad. The strengths, the reason they look at, I was out being an animal, but it took some real strength for me to be able to successfully do those things, to still work, to move, to feed myself. I mean, it was just disaster after disaster, but you get the idea. We'll get back to the cargo ship analogy later. So, further preparation before we start reading step 6 today in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions step book. Let's consider some examples of the word perfection used in step 6 to better understand this, because this was another area it was elusive to me. Page 64. Having been granted a perfect release from alcoholism, the obsession was removed. That's a perfect release. Page 64, 65. God and nature abhor suicide. He, being, in my mind, God, the designer, the creator, the programmer, whatever the case may be for you, Bill says, did not design us to destroy ourselves with alcohol. He did give us instincts to help us stay alive. Continues on later. Page 65. Having departed from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth, perfection used there, I want to use some everyday language and all belief systems to produce a simple example of us attempting to alter a natural-born instinct and the restoration of our natural-born instinct, or our perfect instinct, Bill speaks of. There are times when God, the creator, natural designer, programmer, will quickly push back. And I'm going to use an example now. If you're a parent You're not concerned when your young child holds their breath in anger, as they are soon told no. And they're told no by an unseen force of instinctual programming. We don't quite understand what has happened there. It's pretty remarkable, and we like that. We feel pretty confident that our child's being protected. The human is being protected from themselves, for example. Page 68. Perfect objective, which is God. I believe that's positive goals without limit, for example. We identify, Bill says, the best we can, the concept of perfection being that which created us. Look at, regardless of who we are, it's undeniable that remarkable circumstances somehow evolved to create the human being. I hope you could all appreciate that. To create our mind, our emotions, our natural instincts, our abilities, and even limited ability to comprehend how that even came to be. In step 6, this perfection is a model to strive toward, and we get glimpses of this through the restoration of our own natural instincts and abilities revealed to us as we cast them off. What we believe it really just isn't us. Described oftentimes as those things we find objectionable, in my opinion, and often revealed to us through pain, suffering, humiliation, and as Bill will talk about, the beating alcohol provided to us, resulting in step 1. Page 68, another example of perfection, the 100% admission that if I drank, it's going to go badly. I changed the wording slightly there. It depends on the individual step 1. It depends on your admission. But I had to make 100% admission. If I drink, it's going to go badly. Whatever that step 1 might look for you, that's in a simple context. That truth simply doesn't change for me, ever. It's the way it is. History showed me that. How about page 68? The remaining 11 steps are perfect ideals. That would be a model for best possible future outcome. Goals towards which we look. They're measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress, Bill says. How about page 68, 69? To make advances in areas other than alcoholism. That would be other character defects or problems that we might have. Bill says we shall raise our eyes towards perfection and be ready to walk in that direction. We shall become entirely willing to aim toward perfection by avoiding, I believe, the frame of mind or attitude. No, never. This I will never give up. We avoid that at all costs if we can. And I believe also another one, avoiding procrastination. See, this I will never give up, I believe, is different than maybe someday I can give this up. It's a different, it keeps the door open. But it has to be a specific problem that you've identified and generally does not divorce you from your natural instincts. For example, alcoholism is in collision with our natural instincts. It's in collision, the alcoholism. That's different than someone that can drink in safety. I cannot. Okay, so let's start the reading. It'll be page 63. Expect me to refer a lot to notes along the way and make commentary. I really want you to understand the significance of this very remarkable, paradoxical, important step towards success. Step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. So declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. He goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly, step 6, on all his faults, without any reservations whatever, has indeed come a long way spiritually, and is therefore entitled to be called a man who is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own creator. Wow. Wow, right? Wow. Let's unpack this, shall we? I'd like for us to try to get down to some common everyday language about perhaps what this fine gentleman has just conveyed. So, what does it mean to separate the men from the boys? In a general context, certainly it's a measured level of maturity, I would think. Specific to recovery, in my opinion, maybe it's so serious about recovery and working the higher steps from those milking step 1, 2, and 3, perhaps. But later in this reading, we're going to find out it's the difference between striving for a predetermined, limited success or striving for success without a conscious limit. Limits we place on ourselves or refusing to place a limit and considering greater possibilities. A side note here before we continue, I believe people in recovery confuse efforts towards step 6 with efforts towards step 1. And I think for good reason. One might ask, how can this happen if I haven't done an inventory? In the simplest form, if you're attending meetings, have admitted alcohol is a problem in AA, and are talking about your problem, then you're doing fragments of step 4 and 5. Without realizing it, you're working on step 6, but you might believe it's step 1. Maybe others have sort of conveyed that message to you. My message to you is see and understand the value of your effort. Understand the steps. Understand the natural efforts you've put into it. See the work you've done. Determine what's perhaps been interfering. Organize that stuff. And you're going to find out you might be much further along in a much more control and much more comfortable with setting a new direction. Maybe it's true humility. All right, so we separated the men from the boys. How about without reservation? We covered this early on in Bill's story, but I think we can clean this up some. Is to not consciously place a limiting factor on your potential. We avoid the frame of mind, this I will never give up. Because that's different than maybe someday I can give this up. Relating to areas we find problematic or are working to identify, and or striving for goals that open our minds to limitless goals, new beginnings, limitless possibilities, even godly possibilities. It could be as simple as to stop standing in the way and let it happen. So we have one more in that. Sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his creator. Let's take a crack at breaking that down. How about we develop our uniqueness? Develop true humility. To restore and embrace our intended instincts. That's our intended programming. Arguably, we were born perfect, as it empowers the childlike spirit within us, a spiritual freedom. Do you have access to that childlike, not childish, are very different things. Do you have access to that, or did you separate somewhere along the way? Because that childlike, forgiving, bouncy, playful, hopefully happy, free, maybe that spirit of that is in you if you'll allow it to connect up with you. It can be remarkably mature. So, empowers the childlike spirit within us and revives our perfect or intended strengths and purpose. Perfection is a model to strive for. Bill will indicate later. It's a model to strive for. It's likely not fully ever achievable, but that doesn't mean don't try. It gives you direction and empowers you. So, without conscious limit, willingness, and honesty, we're going to try repeatedly. Try again. If you don't get it the first time, make another run at it. Maybe it isn't absolute failure. See the success. Understand the failure. This can't happen at step one. And without conscious reservations, let it happen. Develop your uniqueness, your freedom. Okay, let's move on to the second paragraph. Of course, the often disputed question of whether God can and will, under certain conditions, remove defects of character will be answered with a prompt affirmative yes by almost any AA member. To him, this proposition, a plan of action, will be no theory at all. It will be just about the largest fact in his life. He will usually offer his proof in a statement like this. Sure, I was beaten. Absolutely licked. Language out of the original Step 6 back in 1935. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol. Change of scene, the best efforts of family, friends, doctors, and clergymen got no place with my alcoholism. I simply couldn't stop drinking, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house, step 4, and then asked a higher power, God as I understand him, to give me release, my obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out of me. A couple of things there in the great paradox. Step 6, in this case, maybe led to step 1. All this effort, he along the way, family and friends and people telling him there's a problem, him knowing himself or her. And at some point, you become aware and you start to make a decision. And, well, AA exists now, and so don't other 12-step programs, for example. And at some point, we enter the program, start looking at step one, and all the information that we're looking back is really the paradoxical step 4, 5, 6, and maybe even 7. Some things go into 7, some maybe 7 kicked us back to step 1. Hopefully that helps you to see that that earlier work is important. And I also want to visit a question. What does it mean to invite the sunlight of the Spirit in, or to invite God in to expel the obsession? Now, a couple of things here. One, we're learning it's not in step 1 that the obsession is being expelled. If you found it happened there, really, it was a result of the work you did as a natural step 6, if you will, leading towards that formal step 1. So we find the obsession, we're dealing with that in 6. If you want to get sober, step 6 and 7. Not step 1. Step 1's important. It's just the beginning. It's just you got to admit a problem before you can work on it. Or at least it makes sense to me. So what does it mean to invite the sunlight of the Spirit in? Because now we're talking about God here. Or to invite God in to expel the obsession. Manifesting itself in terms which all belief systems can understand, and without mistake, I'm going to try for that, or something we can't see or reasonably explain, so others can grasp and measure the progress, stability, value, and truth of it. That's what I'm striving for today, to convey it in terms like that. In this 12-step process, up to this point, we have identified a problem, lacking power for personal success. We identify the need to be empowered, have chosen to be empowered, expressed and displayed willingness to clean house. We've ingested information, reasoning, new perspective, displayed further willingness, opened our mind and heart to new possibilities emotionally, and opened our world up to new possibilities without placing conscious limits. By having done these things, we have become entirely ready. We have empowered ourselves, and the obsession to drink vanished by design. We have done this by not ingesting Bacchus. Remember Bacchus? That's false empowerment, or alcohol, or drugs, lies, misrepresentations, or delusions, things like that. We're trying to be honest and moving in that direction. Okay, now page 64, next 2 paragraphs. In AA meetings all over the world, statements just like this are heard daily. It is plain for everybody to see that each sober AA member has been granted a release from this very obstinate, stubborn, and potentially fatal obsession, the obsession of the mind, followed by a craving of the body. So in a very complete and literal way, all AAs have become entirely ready to have God remove the mania for alcohol from their lives. And God has proceeded to do exactly that with real work put in from us. We're going to put some real work into this. Having been granted a perfect release, the obsession is gone from alcoholism. Why then shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release from every other difficulty or defect? Question. This is a riddle of our existence. A paradox, possibly. The full answer to which may be only in the mind of God. Nevertheless, at least a part of the answer to it is apparent to us. So I want to break that down a little bit. Again, what came first, step 6 or step 1? I believe step 6 is the initial identification of the primary addiction, the natural step 6, or formal. Alcoholism, for example, which initially led us to a step 1. Futures maybe could be discovered as part of a formal process. In this leading to step 1, I believe it's a natural process, but also a rough ride, maybe an unwilling ride. And that's different than being willing. So let's consider this. In jail after arrest or some other failure from drinking, which becomes very evident, what do? Take a quick inventory, maybe talk to someone about it. Maybe you're talking to a lawyer. We conclude that we got a problem to solve. Maybe it shows up in, let's say, humiliation, feeling some shame or fear. If you know what you're feeling, you may feel shame and not even realize what you're feeling. So identifying what you're feeling is important. But sadness, and these are initial step 6 failures without a program. We identify these and we know what the failure feels like. Well, there's also a success at step 6. And this can happen whether you're the offender, the codependent, or family. And just before, say, a natural step 7, no matter who you are, if you're putting effort in, if you see somebody you care for getting hurt, if you're being affected yourself, these problems are going to show up in you. So just understanding some of the process, whether it's formal or whether it's natural. This is important information because we identified in the big book, Bill could see this. It wasn't in a story we found where it would be. There's dark spots that we're trying to fill in here, and Bill is certainly filling it in now. But I think we're just getting started. I hope I can get you far enough where you can take the ball from here 90 years later and really move this puppy forward. So how about understanding character defects a little bit? I talked about the analogy of the cargo ship being the primary addiction, and the cargo on the ship, minor defects, drivers, causes, conditions. You want to change outcomes, failures, damage to others, things like that. So let's say about example, changing your friends as part of this process. You identify I needed to change my friends, and you say, oh, I already did that in step 1. Maybe I say you may have already addressed it, but you did it in step 7 or even step 10 as part of a natural event. Understand the work, see the work, put it together, see the natural components of these steps. Bill may put this in a certain order for us to understand, but he didn't invent any of this. This is just a helpful guiding process to restore us to a life we can appreciate. How about we're entirely ready to get a divorce? It's happened a couple of times out there, I think. So what'd you do? You reasoned out some things in a natural step 4, 5, and 6 for just the average person. But you may address the primary issue beginning back at step 1. Or it may go up to step 7. It matters what it is. Is it the cargo or is it the boat? That's the question. What's going on here? What kind of assistance do you need? Other character defects driven by the effects of drinking are on the boat, or they travel with the boat. Some good, some bad. It wasn't all bad. In step 6, new cargo ships of addiction might be smoking. Maybe we get up to step 6 and discover maybe we need to take something back to step 1. Maybe it's drugs. Maybe it's sex. Maybe it's food. Maybe work. Even musicians, music, performing artists out on the road. My goodness, up on stage and the crowd loves you and it's going well and you're releasing them endorphins and you are high as a kite and then you crash. If you got a family, got to come home sometime, and that doesn't mean you ever took a drink or a drug, but my goodness, if you then also drank or took drugs in addition to that, I hope you can appreciate the power of that, for example. So I believe this is a great paradox. The natural developments before you can begin step 1, again, I think it's important. Recapping, you somehow became aware and reasoned out. You were entirely ready to have a character defect removed as a result of a natural step 6, whereas you then begin a formal step 1. So, that natural step 6. We've been here before. And I think many who believe they're doing step 1 are actually doing step 6, and many who have done a natural step 6 have led to step 1. We're going to read some more here, and we're going to visit that a little deeper because Bill's going to talk about they are humbled by the terrific beating administered by alcohol. The natural step 6. Alcohol pounded the shit out of you, and at some point it became obvious, even to you, something had to give, and hopefully it was the alcoholism. Let's move on to the next paragraph. Page 64, third paragraph. When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit a most unnatural act, defying their instinctive desire for self-preservation. They seem bent upon self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instincts. As they are humbled, become entirely ready by the terrific beating administered by alcohol or other chemical addiction or behaviors, the grace of God can enter them and expel their obsession. The paradox in there. Here, their powerful instinct to live can cooperate fully. Now we're aligning ourselves with the creator, the designer. Our instinct to live can cooperate fully with their creator's desire to give them new life. For nature and God alike abhor suicide. Couple of things before we continue. When new defects are uncovered, you have a question. Do they go to step 7 or to step 1? For example, to stop smoking may require a new step 1. It sure did for me. A year after I quit drinking, I did quit smoking. We even started some Smoker Anonymous meetings to help me with that. I also discovered I was quite angry, propelled by choosing to give that up. It had quite a power over me. But in looking at it directly, when the time is right, there's a question there, with things, smoking. Do you do it at the same time you give up drinking? I didn't. It wasn't a good idea for me to do that. But you can cut back any time. You may confront questions such as, when did I start? Why? Who assisted or empowered the behavior? How about health risks? Behaviors required to smoke or quit, where you have to go to smoke, or how do you change your surroundings to quit? Creating an action plan. And if you're coming back to a step 4 on smoking after you've done one, say, for your primary addiction, it may look a little different. You're intelligent enough, educated enough, been through the system enough to be able to design that, answer these questions more specific to that. Many people, not all, were entirely ready to have God remove a defect of character as a result of jail, alcoholism, divorce, failure, injury, or killed another, long before beginning step 1. All is part of a natural step 6. I believe if something devastating happened and you're in the moment reasoning it out, oh God, help me, that's one avenue. I personally, can't, I can't imagine what someone who couldn't reach for God at this point and only had themselves to reach for after a disaster of their own making, what that felt like inside. I was relieved to know I'm not all there is. However, I know what it's like to be at that very wretched place of utter failure. And I offer some hope for all belief systems. Regardless of your belief system, I think there is good news that your creator, maybe it's your designer, your programmer, maybe there's some other description. Somehow we came to be and we have these instincts that appear to want better for me than hurting myself or arguably others. I think it's fair to reason out that if he doesn't want me hurting myself, why would he want me hurting others? No, I'm not naive. The world's a very difficult place, and we are driven by many different struggles that can provoke us or others. But the restoration of the perfection Bill speaks of appears to be a positive advance for us. As far as I can tell, it appears that way. Otherwise said, I'm not all there is, right? And even if it is only the reset of my natural instincts, those which are instinctually protecting me, it will empower me toward a more successful, balanced life. We can be confident of that, just as a parent is with a young child that they cannot hold their breath without being told no by a power of design likely described as spiritual in nature. It's there. I don't know where it came from. It's powerful. We have limits to keep us safe, except for when we choose to exceed those limits, because we are told no. We have feelings that guide us. There's a lot going on, and look, there's circumstances out there. People are coming from a great distance of pain driven by many, many things, but we can get there. The concept that we were born perfect, what I mean by that is we've committed no violation. We've not resented anyone, arguably. We're just pure. We are what we are. And by Bill's other descriptions of perfection, right, that's the perfect beginning. Maybe we have struggles, but those instincts are there to protect us, and we can trust that. If we choose to do the work to restore those in our thoughts, attitudes, and actions, our belief systems, our reservations, our hate, racism, I mean, all these things that influence us, at some point we may be confronted with the choice: which road am I going to get on? Especially someone else in recovery. Am I going to give them bad information? For example, I was confronted with those types of questions along the way. It's life, it's the way it is. The recovery process is quite profound. I have found the people in recovery to be exceptional when it comes to helping me get sober. We're all in it together. Page 64, last paragraph through the second paragraph, page 65. But most of our other difficulties don't fall under such a category at all, not so devastating and destructive. Every normal person wants, for example, to eat, to reproduce, to be somebody in the society of his fellows. And he wishes to be reasonably safe and secure as he tries to attain these things. Sounds reasonable to me? Indeed. God made him that way. So our designer, our programmer, whatever, however we came to be, this complex being that we are, he did not design man to destroy himself by alcohol. But he did give man instincts to help him to stay alive. Now, a little side note, here's a paradox, a contradiction leading to sanity or insanity as a battle ensues. Chasing the old alcohol, and if you're drunk like I am anyway, or other stuff. Page 65. It is nowhere evident, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us fully to eliminate our instinctual drives. We need these suckers. So far as we know, it is nowhere on the record that God has completely removed from any human being all his natural drives. That isn't what we're seeking to achieve. Fear drives. Fear of the unknown has a remarkable power over our instincts, our direction. Moving on. Since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, it isn't strange that we often let these far exceed their intended purpose. When they drive us blindly, or we willfully demand that they supply us more satisfaction or pleasures than are possible or due us. Buckus, I need a payout here. That is the point at which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our character defects, or if you wish, of our sins. So let's break this down a little bit. I believe the better we understand our natural instincts and our excessive misuse of them, the better we understand our individual self, the unique self, that which drives us good or bad, the better we can measure the distance between them, the natural versus the excess. We can better see how failure has happened, why, and how to return to the degree of perfection programmed within us, guiding survival strengths that are now corrupted. Our natural instincts are always influenced. They're influenced by us. We got to look at our thinking, thoughts, attitudes, and actions. They're influenced by our desires, wants, needs, surroundings, our history, our thoughts, attitudes, actions, and goals. And they're different in each of us. Some instincts are strong, but others lay dormant. Both can be provoked. Fight or flight, for example, fear driven by food insecurity, feeling safe or unsafe, hurting others, hate, the luxury to pursue addiction or need to for other reasons, identified as X, that mathematical equation. Fill in X. What is X for you? Only you can fill in X for you. The paradoxical pursuit, unbalanced pursuit of instinctual success or failure, requires us to admit something is a problem before we can fix it. Something has influenced natural instinct. Now excessive and altered instinct driven by X. Again, only you can answer. What is X for you? It's an individual program. How do you feel about things in step 4, for example? That's how you start to look at this. Why you feel that way. Do you see the full extent of historical outcomes guided by your thoughts, attitudes, actions, behaviors, strengths, and weaknesses? Can you see those things? Are you willing to see those things? Can you do the work? And or is it just easy to head on down to the bar? You and Buckus and what? What's X look like there? Can you now see causes and conditions, and are you now able and willing to consider future possibilities, future ideals, or best possible future outcomes towards the success of your recovery? It is incredible how empowered you can be if you allow it and move in that direction. Let me touch a little bit more on what I mean, the paradox of sanity and insanity. Resolving the quagmire. What makes me feel good also makes me insane. When I'm sane, I don't feel good. There's real information there and reasoning, and we need to untie that knot so that the natural instincts line up. Page 65, third paragraph. If we ask, God will certainly forgive our derelictions, our failures. But in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. That is something we are supposed to be willing to work toward ourselves. He asks only that we try as best we know how to make progress in the building of character. So, what's going on here? God will forgive our derelictions, neglects, failures. This suggests requiring forgiveness, driven by guilt from things that maybe were within our control. There's a difference between what was within our control and what wasn't. How much guilt was ours? Is it I had a choice guilt? Or is it survival guilt? For example, this building of character involves evaluation of emotional strength now and at the time, moral values, useful traits such as integrity, courage, and self control, in an effort towards positive change in how we think, behave, and interact with friends, family, and society. We are and will continue to steer the ship, and one of our greatest strengths is knowing when to ask for direction, for help, or assistance, and when to embrace strength or limitation. Yes, we ask God for help, but we're running the show. We're not just handing us over to God. He could do. What's the purpose of us in our lives? The character building. I don't know what the purpose is of me being here necessarily in this lifetime, but I do believe the evolution, the development that happens here goes with me. A personal belief. Now, page 65, last two paragraphs into page 66. So, step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude, a mindset, if you will, one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifetime job. So, the best possible attitude one can take. This does not mean that we expect all our character defects to be lifted out of us as the drive to drink was. A few of them may be, but with most of them, we shall have to be content with patient improvement. We'll hone in on that one directly and put some work into it, in my opinion. The key words entirely ready underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we know or can learn. So we're aiming in that direction. Last paragraph. How many of us have this degree of readiness? In an absolute sense, practically nobody has it. There's limitations. The best we can do with all the honesty that we can summon is to try to have it. If you think something will work, maybe it has a chance. If you think it's gonna suck, well, probably it is. So, try to move in a given direction and you put some effort into it, honest effort. Even then, the best of us will discover, to our dismay, to our dislike, or didn't work out as well as you'd hoped, that there is always a sticking point. A point at which we say, no, I can't give this up yet. So in step 6 and 7, you may encounter this. Be honest about it. And we shall often tread on even more dangerous ground when we cry, this I will never give up. Try to avoid that line of thinking. Such is the power of our instincts to overreach themselves. No matter how far we have progressed desires will always be found which oppose the grace of God. So I want to break this down a little bit. To begin this lifetime job that he speaks of, this beginning of a lifetime job is a new way of thinking. Truly, it's a new way of behaving. It's a personality change, a different way you process and implement information within yourself, valuing honesty toward yourself as critical for your success. Your word to yourself is everything. And continue to build on the embracing and evolving of true humility. Who and what I am, followed by an honest and sincere attempt to become what I could be. As I make progress in what I could be, it becomes who I am. In a positive way or in a negative way. Head on down to the bar or ingest drugs or do these crazy things and they become you. But you can also discard that and change. How about the concept, no, I can't give this up yet, and this I will never give up, are likely places we have been before, both naturally and paradoxically. Examples, drink or don't drink, sex or not, and stuff that comes with that, drugs or not, steal or not, spend or save, major decisions around relationships, often relating to a significant problem dominating our lives and requiring contemplative, to really consider it, painful decisions with questionable success, especially if it opposes what is in our heart or is in conflict with our core instincts, revealed through our feelings and our behaviors. So another thought, the 12-step process, coming from natural step 6 to a formal step 1, allows us to take control of the ride and to smooth out the journey toward real success. Instincts in collision will show up, even in long-term recovery. As we change and grow, they're gonna show up. Trust me on that. And new instincts will wake up from a dormant state to assist us. But also they can drive us. Say I'm being driven right now, I'm being driven to do these videos. It's a very positive thing, but I've been driven in other ways in the pursuit of hopeful success, things that didn't go so well. And I had to accept that and change course. Hopefully this is going well. Here's a way of thinking, a way to turn something around, a way to empower yourself and not take things personally. If someone says they don't believe you can change, or they don't believe people can change, what are they really saying? What they're saying is they don't believe they can change. Don't take it personally. Instead, offer to help them. Step 12. You could begin by sharing that while it's not a perfect world, I do my best to avoid thinking such as, this I will never give up, and instead consider thinking like, maybe I can give this up. Maybe I can change. Others have success toward positive change. Change is a choice. What temporary barrier stands in my way? You get the idea. We can change, we can grow, we can improve, become better people. There's a process for doing that, and the ones that think that can't happen are limiting themselves.
This completes part 1 of 2 videos reviewing Step 6 in the Alcoholics Anonymous Step Book. In our next video, part 2 continues where Step 6 focuses on the inventory lists we developed in Step 4. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Ring the bell to be notified when new content is added. Also, you can support the channel 12-Step Guide with Troyo by donating through PayPal to hsworldservice@yahoo.com. Thanks for watching.